with that, we have our panel on AI in the enterprise, co-moderated by myself and Dheeraj. I'd like to welcome onto the stage our panelists. Our first one is Harnath Babu, CIO of KPMG. Round of applause, please. Should we get the chair?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our second panelist is Munish Blaggan, Head of Transformation at ICICI Bank. And our final panelist is Ratan Kesh, Bandhan Bank, COO. Round of applause, please. Okay, welcome, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for participating in our conference and in this panel. We have an exploration of AI during this panel, AI in the enterprise, and we're really trying to assess, is AI going to be something pervasive and deep, or is it going to be something superficial that is, maybe not talked about as much as it is today? So we'll start here. In the past few years, we've moved from a physical workplace to a virtual one, and now to a hybrid one. And people are feeling the Zoom fatigue. They're feeling, so many Slack messages, so many emails. They're doing more and more and more. Or some people are feeling, excited about AI's possibilities. They're full of new ideas. And they're embracing this new way of working. So, Ratan, why don't you start? What is the pulse on your people? What is the pulse on your people? How are the people in your organization feeling?
About AI?
About AI and...
About work.
Okay. No, so, COVID have had a significant impact on humanity, but clearly, among all the bad things that has happened during the COVID period, there are so many good things that has emerged out of that whole situation. And the whole world, as you look back, you realize that probably that was one of the great events to have happened to the humanity, to really see and transform the organizations in a way that has happened today. The progress of digitization, adoption of AI has become a lot faster as we progress. Now, clearly, I think organizations are not thinking AI as a different initiative anymore. I think AI is getting embedded into, at least for banks, we are seeing AI is getting embedded into the day-to-day life of every single employee across the spectrum, whether it is the sales guys at the front end, whether it is at the mid-office or the back office. You see the advent of AI coming and making an impact. And impacts are happening, somewhere it's slow, somewhere it's a very deep impact that is happening. And it is here to stay. And that's how I look at it.
And do you find that the people in your organization are really excited by the possibility of AI? How have they embraced it?
So, it's quite interesting. At one end, you find the top-notch companies are using purely based on AI, whereas you find some of the banks in India are still afraid of AI in some parts of the bank. Now, some people still misunderstand that AI probably take their job, or they think that AI would require a significant amount of skill to be able to do coding. But I think one has to realize that AI is not about coding. Somebody will do the coding and AI will make his or her life simpler. Therefore, one can use AI to be more efficient, more productive, bring better credit quality, provide access to finance. I think some of these are going to happen a lot more. But yes, there is still some bit of two schools of thought, and I think somewhere in between as well. So we need a lot more clarity to come in, which will happen over a period of time.
Awesome, thank you. I'm actually going to flip to the next slide. And this is a discussion actually that we had the other day. There was this thing called the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. And it refers to the fact that the greatest obstacle for urbanization was this problem of horse manure. And people were predicting that, in 50 years we would be buried under horse manure. They never considered the possibility of automobiles coming and solving this problem. We can kind of think about AI as an automobile here, but there needs to be a major ecosystem and cultural change for AI to really thrive. Harnath, can you talk to me a little bit about what you think that ecosystem and cultural change will have to be?
Sure. Thanks, Aditi. I think it's an interesting question. I wouldn't really want to say that we have to clean any more manure on the roads, for sure. I think we have moved ahead quite a lot. And if you just go back in time, I think this is one example where we said technology like automobiles came in, and a lot of change that happened in the ecosystem obviously created newer opportunities for people, right? Newer opportunities in terms of, let's say, cars started coming on the roads. I think there's a complete new industry that got formed, right? And if I just draw parallels to electricity, right? I think back in 1880 when it came, I think it took almost 40 years for people to realize what's the potential of the technology. And I think if I have to say AI, I think we are in the very initial stages of that transformation or the transition, right? I think what we call is between times. So we are actually in the between times of transitioning from the initiation of the technology to maturity, right? I think we're somewhere there. And another example that I can take is when Boeing launched its airliner, the bigger one, I think 797 if I'm not wrong, I think everything changed in terms of transport, right? So you had to redesign your airports, you had to redesign your runways, you had to relook at the number of people who were coming in and traveling, you had to relook at practically everything. The whole ecosystem changed. So what I'm trying to get to is AI is one of those fundamental technologies which has come into play. It's been there for a while. And I think all of us have got excited with the possibilities of the technology for a reason that we have been able to experience it by ourselves. So as an end user or as a consumer, we've been experiencing AI for a while, but it hasn't been that visible. I think you wanted to create something. So far, I think AI was there to assist you on a lot of things that you wanted to do. You wanted to look for information, so you were going and talking to Google Home or Alexa or whatever, right? You were having those conversations with Siri maybe, right? But what has now happened is you are able to ask something and create along with AI. I think that's what has really kicked in and people are able to associate their creativity, which is coming through AI, as theirs. I think that's exactly is exciting people.
It's like the browser did to computer networking.
Exactly, right? Netscape came in. I think it was, now it's, I mean, people could experience something new. It's exactly the experience that people are going through. So if I, to kind of cut short my answer, I think we are in the very initial stages of the technology. A long way to go. I think we have just scratched the surface in terms of the art of possible.
I just want to make one quick comment. I think great point. On this stage itself, I heard people saying that AI is going to make your job a threat, you're going to lose jobs, etc., etc. If you have to approach AI from that lens that people are going to lose jobs, you will always have more friction to adopt AI. I think technology has proven over centuries, when you get a better technology, it gives prosperity to the economy, it creates more jobs. I think, therefore, my belief is that on a short term, in specific pockets, it may have an impact, but in the long run, it will create more jobs and more prosperity.
Absolutely. The glass is half full. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Tell me a bit more. You talked about AI in this more short-term view of assistance and all of that, but what does AI really look like when it's implemented more fundamentally, when it's built in versus bolted on, and how are you kind of seeing that in your organization?
So if I have to kind of, okay, so the question you're asking is from a long-term perspective on AI?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So I think, as I was mentioning, I think it's the interfacing that we are seeing, right, from an AI perspective. So we are seeing the change coming in, and again, if you just go back in time a little, if you wanted to acquire knowledge in the past, right, what you would have to do, you have to get to encyclopedias, Britannicas of the world, and then pull out some information and assimilate the information to create the knowledge that you wanted to. Then came the search engines. You started looking for information, looked at 10 different sites, assimilate the information, do. Now you go to a chat window, put your prompt, and the information is available, right? And in a very nice format. So what's happening is evolution is happening in terms of the way AI has been changing the experience of people, number one. Number two, the art of possible I was referring to, right? So I think taking a cue from this, I think there are possibilities that we are looking at in future where we are saying that many of the processes, and again, when we look at, and to my earlier point, when electricity came in, right, and people had to move from the mechanical way of working, the steam way of working to electricity, I think the whole idea was we just go and change one part of the piece in the machinery and everything will work the way it was running earlier, right? But what fundamentally also changed in 40 years or the time that we looked at is there were newer opportunities that got created, right? If you look at a factory today, it's not one motor that is running. It's practically, millions of devices or hundreds of devices which are there, which are functioning independently, but they're powered by electricity. Similarly, when you are looking at AI in the enterprises, you're not trying to solve a problem which is a short-term problem. The current scenario is you're trying to, let's say, reduce the number of people or trying to optimize a particular process. You're trying to bring in AI. That's a very point solution, or this is a point approach, right? But what needs to be done, to my example of electricity, is you have to take a step back, relook at everything in terms of processes, how you're doing business itself, right? How you're running the whole process, and bring AI as a fundamental layer under the business itself, right? Unless you do that, you'll continue to focus on those point solution, and again, you'll create multiple silos. And I think the examples that we were seeing, right? You have a customer interface, you have the sales interface, you have a support interface, right? And the product interface. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to recreate the way the business works, right? The way business looks at problem statements. I think that's exactly what businesses will need to do when they look at AI as one of the fundamental enablers.
Yeah, and by the way, we call it, at least in Silicon Valley, there's a word that VCs have started to use, GPT wrapper companies. They're just wrapping GPT up. Akin to what happened in the internet era where a website was a company. Like every .com domain that you could buy was a company. And that obviously created a huge froth. I think what we're seeing right now is GPT wrappers that people are trying to fund, and eventually a lot of them will just die. So thank you for that.
I really like what you said about barely scratching the surface of AI, and it's something actually we'll come back to a little bit later. But for now, I want to move on to the next slide. And there's a bit of a parallel here in how we're seeing AI heavily used, at least for now, in the front office. And then it's still finding its place in the back office for functions that require a lot more precision, things like taxes, accounting, banking. AI still has a long way to go. And in the last decade, you saw big data in the front office, where you saw in the back office things that were more rule-based, more precise, more rigid. Something like small data, I guess, on the back office, and then big data in the front office. Munish, do you think we're seeing a similar dichotomy emerge with AI as well?
So first of all, I'd like to appreciate the theme of this event itself, effortless. I guess most of us are in this business, whether it's a customer, whether it's our employees or our supervisors, or even our family. That's what we want to make it effortless. And on this specific topic, what I feel is that if you look at AI in different personas will play a different role. Whether it's a front end, it may be more of a assisted. If you look at in a banking environment itself, our 90+ transactions are happen digitally. So there's very limited touch with the customer. So possibly in that, AI can help to service customer much better. Most of our sites or apps are static in nature. How do we can make it dynamic or responsive to a customer need? That is what more important. And if you look at a backend, personally I see that we don't have so many superhumans. And somewhere this AI will help to augment the information or make the information available seamlessly to a person so that they can make it much more smarter decisions. So that's where the big data or other, or making information seamlessly available in an analyzed form, that's where the AI will play a critical role.
You said something important here. It still requires the human to have judgment, correct? I think that's something that we need to recognize and appreciate before we say, oh, AI can't do these back office functions. There's a distinction here between prediction and judgment. Talk to me a little bit about that distinction.
It's definitely the AI engines, what we have seen is that because the way they have grown over a period of time, it's early days, and there's a lot of hallucination which happen in some of the decision making. So you definitely at this stage require an assisted model, even when it's customer interaction. What we believe is that the initial training part of it may be assisted, wherein the AI may give insights or inputs. Then somebody will confirm it out that whether this is working fine or not. Similarly, in the backend, wherein the precision is very, very important. I can't take a judgment saying that key, and we have seen enough of cases where an AI can go wrong. And so that's where this aspect of it, wherein I provide information and let the human being take a decision of this, that will play a critical role. So it's not going to replace. Yeah.
If I may add there, I think it's about, so I think there's been a fear, and to your point, there's been a fear that jobs will go. But I think if you look at AI, I think it's important to decouple the judgment and the prediction, right? So AI can help you predict. AI can give you information. AI can solve a lot of that, a problem which is on the. So basically, the heavy lifting can be done by AI. But if you bring a human in the loop, right? I think that's where you can take decisions. And again, and let me take a simple example. Let's say if you need to do underwriting in a bank, right? Or maybe for lending, or maybe for insurance you want to underwrite. I think what could potentially what AI could do is, and because AI can have biases, and to your point, Munish, AI can have biases depending on the data. You could potentially have AI recommend you certain outcomes, and you can take a decision as a human. Only thing that will happen is to what level you want to delegate the judgment, right? You need not have as large a workforce to do the judgment and to take those decisions. You will have people who will have better understanding of the domain, better understanding of the information, and possibly a broader perspective. I think those can take the decision, right? So what will happen in a way, AI is augmenting a lot of it's augmenting, it's helping the individual take decisions. So I think I just want to add to what Munish just mentioned.
I think it's not about big data versus small data. It's not about front office versus back office. I mean, unless you power the front office, you don't capture the right data. And once you capture lots of data, you actually have got huge analytics, which you can utilize and use AI to be able to power the front end as also the back end. So, for example, today for a trade transaction in banks, it requires a significant amount of banking knowledge. How do you really pass on and get as many bankers to do lots of transactions? You can convert that into data and use AI to improve the mean quickly. Because even your average bankers with little experience, they can use those 37 to 40 validation done through the AI and then use this human interface to really go and take the transaction decision. So some of these can be helped. So both at the back office and the front office, it's useful.
Yeah, awesome. I like what you said. You can almost equalize your workforce by providing them with all the same information and expertise through AI. And it actually brings up something interesting. I think a lot of the use cases we're seeing around AI are predominantly search or information retrieval. And I think that's a good segue to talk a little bit about RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. Harnath, do you want to define RAG and tell me maybe how you're using it in your organization?
Yeah, sure. I think, so if I just have to simplify the term, right? So if I want to teach my kindergarten or maybe primary school child, I don't need to get a Harvard professor, right? So effectively what I'm saying is, if my use case is very small, and if I'm trying to get ChatGPT with 174 billion parameters, I'm having a professor coming in and trying to think of possibly everything and give an answer which my child won't understand, right? It may not be suitable. So I think choosing the right model for the enterprises. So what's your use case? What's the model that you're looking at, number one. Number two, some of the decisions, I mean, to my earlier point, if you're creating, you're an end consumer, like any of us who goes and chats with ChatGPT or any other, or Gemini, you're happy to look at a lot of content and you're fancily putting it in some blog or wherever, right? That may not be applicable in enterprises. Enterprises are serious business, right? So I think what's important is the responses that the LLMs give has to be very cut and dry. When I'm saying cut and dry, it has to be to the point. If it's an LLM which is sitting on regulations, regulatory information, again, I think some of the examples I can think of is in our business, if we are doing audit, we need to practically be aware of all the possible regulations in the world, right? Because we are going and auditing our clients. We do not want to have, to your point, hallucinations or fancily written English, it doesn't work like that, right? I think it's important to train your models. Go for the right model. Train your model with right information. So if I'm having all the regulations that are there, possibly train that model with deregulations using RAG. RAG is one option. Second is you can actually do fine-tuning of the models. Both are different. Technically, we are trying to do the same thing. The idea is you do not want this guy who's well-learned model to think something and give you the information, but possibly look at this information which you're training on. So that's exactly what is RAG, right?
So the fact that there's memory in a vector database, and then you put grammar on top of it.
Exactly, right? So it's a vector database or a library, whatever, depending on your use case. You could choose one of the options and create the vector embeddings and look for information, right? So I think it's technical if you really get into it, but the idea is for an enterprise, choose the right model, look for the information that you want to train the model onto, and build the right use cases on top of it.
You know, what I'm most impressed with, I mean, we talked about evolution in the first half of this conference, like how people are learning. When I hear you talk about vector embeddings, I'm like, that is learning. You know, you're learning deeply about this. And I think it gave me goosebumps, like, wow, a CIO of KPMG is talking about vector embeddings, which means that you must be a deep person, you know, at some level. Thank you for really doing that for everybody else, you know. It inspires, I'm sure, a lot of people in the audience as well, you know. Thank you.
You know, I think I was reading these questions to someone earlier, and they said, you know, that's very technical. Are they going to be able to get to that level of depth? But I too was really impressed and pleasantly surprised by how, you know, abreast of all the technical advances that you all are. So that's awesome.
So maybe in the interest of time, we just go to Jan LeCun stuff and...
yes, let's go to the last one. Let's jump to this one. I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but I'll synthesize it for you really quick. So in this post, Jan is really saying that, you know, text and language are relatively low bandwidth, while vision is much higher bandwidth. And I'll just take you to this in other words part. So in other words, bandwidth of visual perception is much higher than written language. And what that means is in 4 years, a child has seen 50 times more data than the biggest LLMs trained on all the text publicly available on the internet. So through vision and through visuals, we learn so much more. And without that, we'll never reach a human level of AI without this input from vision. So basically what I'm saying is, and what we said even earlier, is that we're barely scratching the surface here of AI. And we're nowhere near AGI or artificial general intelligence that people talk so much about. But
maybe this is a great question for Vinod at the dinner as well. You know, he talks about AGI a lot, but when I look at all this stuff, by the way, Jan is somebody that I learn a lot from. So for those of you who don't follow him, please do. There's a lot of really good nuggets about real life and the brain and the analogies of life that he'll actually bring out there as well, you know. But yeah, I think, Aditi, go ahead, you know. Maybe the comment I want to make is what Harnath, Babu, you said, you know, we are scratching the surface. And hopefully it's not a 40-year ride. I mean, it's probably 10 to 15 because, you know, the cycle of creative destruction is also shrinking. But just maybe 30 seconds each one of you, like, what do you think about the trials and tribulations of the next 5 years in terms of scratching the surface, going to vision, really, first of all, having this promise that you make to yourself and your people that we have to be on this bandwagon or we get lost in the way the people, I mean, a lot of companies got lost in the internet era as well because they were so physical, they were so attached to paper, they never appreciated the internet, and the rest is history. So what's the promise that you're making to your companies about really going down this path and understanding and learning a lot as well? So we'll start with you.
I guess the answer is quite obvious. I mean, you got to adopt the technology. You got to adopt AI to remain relevant. Because if you don't, you will extinct. That's the reality.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. You know, Munish, for you.
Same here. I guess AI is gonna stay over here, and there's no option but to embrace it and move forward with that here.
I think, as I said, we're just scratching the surface. So I think it's early days, but it's a fundamental shift in the way technology, I mean, a newer technology has come in. Obviously, it's going to be disrupting a lot of what we see in the future. Yeah. So
I want to complement it with humans. I think the relationship aspect of it. So many of you, or probably most of you, don't know here that Harnath Babu was one of our first customers of Nutanix in India, one of the first. And then Munish is right now one of the largest in India, and with more than 1,000 nodes of Nutanix. And the fact that they came to this conference is about human relationships. I mean, hopefully we served you well. There was an immense net promoter score delight as well that came with it. So thank you to both of you and to all three of you to really having made this journey from wherever you're coming and really making this about people and learning from each other rather than just be at the mercy of technology. Thank you again.
Thank you.